Welcome to a world where the impossible was just a blueprint away. The year is 1961. The air is thick with the scent of jet fuel and the invisible hum of radiation. This was the atomic age. A time when humanity didn't just discover a new energy source, we found a godlike power. In the 1960s, the atom was the answer to every question. Need to power a city? Use an atom. Need to flatten a mountain for a highway? Use a nuclear blast. We were promised nuclear cars, like the Ford Nucleon. We were promised nuclear planes that could stay airborne for months. But there was one titan that almost made it to the tracks. A machine so massive, so powerful, and so terrifying that it could have changed the face of the Earth forever. This is the story of the General Atomics Trago. A nuclear-powered locomotive. A rolling reactor. A beast of steel and uranium. Phase 2, the birth of Trago, the blueprints of madness. Let's step into the design rooms of General Atomics. Imagine long drafting tables covered in blueprints. Engineers in white short-sleeved shirts and black ties, calculating numbers that would make a modern supercomputer sweat. The Trago wasn't just a bigger train. It was an engineering anomaly. It was designed to be over 100 feet long. That's nearly 30 meters of solid, reinforced steel. It weighed thousands of tons. But the heart of the beast? That was the scary part. Inside the Trago sat a high-temperature gas-cooled reactor. Unlike the diesel engines of the time that relied on combustion, Trago relied on fission. The reactor would heat helium gas to extreme temperatures. This gas would then drive a massive turbine. That turbine would generate 3,000 horsepower of pure, unadulterated electrical energy. Imagine the efficiency. 1 single gram of uranium-235 contains more energy than 2 to 3 million liters of diesel fuel. Theoretically, the Trago could depart from New York, travel to Los Angeles, turn around, go to Florida, and keep running for 10 years without ever stopping for fuel. It was a logistics dream. A train that never sleeps. A monster that never eats. Phase 3, the shielding dilemma, the weight of safety. But physics is a cruel mistress. You can't just put a reactor on wheels and call it a day. You have to contain the radiation. And this is where the Trago hit its first wall, the shielding. To keep the crew and the passengers alive, the reactor needed to be encased in layers of lead, boron, and high-density concrete. This shield alone weighed hundreds of tons. This created a paradox. To make the train safe, you had to make it so heavy that the tracks might literally crumble beneath it. Engineers had to redesign the entire wheel system. They were looking at multi-axle configurations that looked more like a centipede than a locomotive. Every bridge in America would have needed reinforcement. Every tunnel would have needed widening. The infrastructure of the 19th century was being asked to carry the weight of the 21st century's most dangerous technology. Phase 4, the accident scenario, a mobile Chernobyl. Now, let's talk about the nightmare. The question that kept politicians awake at night. What happens if it crashes? Imagine a Trago locomotive traveling at 80 miles per hour through a small town in Ohio or the suburbs of Chicago. Suddenly, a rail snaps. The 1,000-ton beast tilts. It slides. It slams into a station. In a diesel train, you get a fire. In a nuclear train, you get a meltdown. The reactor core, heated to thousands of degrees, could breach its containment. If the cooling system failed during a crash, you wouldn't just have a train wreck. You would have a radioactive plume drifting over miles of farmland. You would have to evacuate entire counties. General Atomics tried to solve this with impact cages. They designed the reactor to be the most indestructible part of the train. They claimed it could survive a high-speed collision with a mountain. But the public didn't believe them. The Cold War was already full of nuclear fear. People were building fallout shelters in their backyards. They didn't want a rolling reactor passing by their children's bedroom windows every night at 2 a.m. Phase 5, the Cold War rivalry and the Soviet shadow. Why did the US even consider this? Because they weren't alone. Behind the Iron Curtain, Soviet engineers were working on the Obyek-279 and other nuclear transport projects. The Soviets wanted a nuclear train to move ICBMs, intercontinental ballistic missiles, across the vast Siberian wilderness. It was a game of nuclear chicken. If the Soviets had a nuclear train, the Americans had to have one too. It was a matter of national prestige. The Trago was supposed to be the symbol of American capitalist efficiency. But as the 1960s progressed, the reality of the Vietnam War and the space race began to drain the budget. Phase 6, the final nail in the coffin. By 1961, the math simply stopped making sense. Three things killed the Trago. Economics: diesel was cheap. The cost of building one Trago was equal to building 50 high-end diesel locomotives. Maintenance: you couldn't just take a nuclear train to a regular repair shop. You needed nuclear physicists to change the oil. Public perception: that Atoms for Peace era was dying. People were starting to realize that radiation was a silent killer. In late 1961, the project was quietly shelved. The blueprints were rolled up and put into the dusty archives of the Department of Energy. The Trago never breathed. Its turbine never spun. Phase 7, Conclusion and the Modern Legacy. Is the idea dead? Not quite. Today, we are seeing a resurgence in SMR, small modular reactors, technology. Companies are again looking at nuclear-powered ships and even space tugs. The Trago was a failure, but it was a visionary failure. It pushed the limits of what we thought was possible. History is a graveyard of wild ideas. But sometimes, the ghosts of these ideas return. Would you trust a nuclear train today? In an age of climate change and the need for green energy, maybe the atomic iron horse wasn't a mistake, maybe it was just 60 years too early. Like this video if you learned something new. What do you think? Was the Trago a genius invention or a recipe for disaster? Comment your thoughts below and subscribe for more fascinating stories. This has been Synapse Daily. See you in the future.